Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. I welcome my dear brothers, sisters, and viewers at home from both my previous community, St. Louis, and from my current community, Greenville. Alhamdulillah, for the first time in the history of this community and the history of St. Louis as well, we are having a collaboration between the Islamic Society of Greenville and the Islamic Foundation of Greater St. Louis. The program that we would like to present for all of you today is known as the Fiqh of Fasting. As many people know, in this month we will be fasting regularly every single day. And there are etiquettes that go along with fasting. There are do's, there are don'ts, and so on and so forth. One of the questions that I've been regularly asked since actually the beginning of the month of Ramadan is, can I take the vaccine? If I take the vaccine, does it invalidate my fast? If I decide to break my fast because I feel fatigue or I feel sick, is this okay? Do I have to make up a fast? Do I have to give fidya? These are several questions that we get asked. And many at times we have the spiritual discussions behind fasting, but we don't have the do's and the don'ts. We don't talk about these sorts of things. So alhamdulillah, myself and your resident scholar of St. Louis community has actually designed a program in order for us to learn about the do's, the don'ts, the etiquettes, what is actually behind this fasting. Shaykh Hamzah Imtiaz is actually our guest today, inshallah al-aziz. Shaykh Hamzah, are you here?
Yes, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shaykhana, how are you doing today?
Alhamdulillah, Imam Huzaifa, how are you?
Alhamdulillah. It's great to see your face, mashallah. For those of you that don't know, Shaykh Hamzah is actually my friend. He's my mentor. He's somebody that was years ahead of me in studies, but is actually younger than me, mashallah. For those people that know, and it's no surprise to the St. Louis community, mashallah, in the last 2 years, he's had a huge impact. And I sort of want to introduce Shaykh Hamzah a little bit before we go into the program. The St. Louis community knows him. However, my own community, my current community, Greenville, needs to know a little bit about Shaykh Hamzah. Shaykh Hamzah, mashallah, he actually lived in St. Louis his whole life, and he grew up attending Islamic school there. He memorized the Quran, mashallah. He was the first homegrown Hafiz of Quran from our Darul Quran Foundation in St. Louis. Thereafter, after he had finished his hifz, he attended high school, and after high school, he traveled and journeyed all the way to Pakistan, where he studied in the illuminary school known as Madrasatul Hasanain, with illuminaries like Sheikh Ramzi al-Habib al-Tunisi and Maulana Tariq Jamil Saab, where he began his initiatory studies in the Arabic language. After this, he joined Madrasatul Imdadiyya, where he studied under one of the greatest hadith experts of Pakistan, known as Mufti Muhammad Zahid, Hafidhahullah. After this, he actually went to the great and prestigious school known as Darul Ulum Karachi in Karachi, where I was actually born. And he studied under the Grand Mufti of Pakistan, Mufti Rafi Uthmani, and his brother, a well-known researcher and scholar to both the Arab and the subcontinent world, Mufti Taqi Uthmani. So as you can see, the Sheikh has his academic standards are extremely high. After his studies, he actually came back to our community in St. Louis, where I grew up, and he is serving there as the resident scholar. And for the people of St. Louis, mashallah, he started some great initiatives like a Sira Dars, where about 500 people were attending, mashallah, from week to week. This was the efforts that our Sheikh put in. He continues to put great programming together. He also serves as a teacher at the Miftah Institute in Michigan. MashaAllah, tabarakallah, may Allah preserve the Shaykh. So inshallah, today the Shaykh will be speaking a little bit about the fiqh of fasting, the etiquettes, the do's and don'ts for those of you that are joining now, inshallah. So without further ado, I don't want to take up much time. You all know my face, but inshallah, jazakumullah khairan, Shaykh Hamzah, for joining us today. Please enlighten us about these realities.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Truly it is an honor to join Imam Huzaifa and his community from Greenville, and my community as well from the Islamic Foundation of Greater St. Louis. Imam Huzaifa was very generous with his praise, and he said a lot of lofty words. I asked that Allah allow me to live up to them, and Allah forgive me of that which Allah keeps hidden from people. Alhamdulillah. It's great to see Imam Huzaifa as well, mashallah, very active in his community. Within a few months, mashallah, he's rolling, mashallah, and he's got his programs, and mashallah, he's working hard there. I want us to jump straight into the topic just to preserve all of your time, and I want us to finish in about an hour or so. I don't want us to go longer than that. So I want to get right into the topic, inshallah. But before I start, there's a few preliminary points that I think need to be kept in mind. And then I'll pull up the slides, inshallah, and we can get there. But there's a few points that I want you all to keep in mind. The nature of some of the talks that we do, or most of the talks that we do, are inspirational. They are inspirational. They are motivational. This is not an inspirational talk. It's not a motivational talk. So what that means is, number one, is that there is an extra level of attention that needs to be paid, right? So, not to take away from our other talks, but for our other talks, if you are, for example, doing some work and you're listening in, you can still kind of follow along. But for something like this, which is educational, if you don't tune in for the entire segment, you'll be lost. So you want to make sure that for this session, you give some extra time and pay kind of close attention and not multitask while doing this. Number two is that, as I said, this is an educational aspect. Now, for Ramadan, there is the spiritual aspect, right? And from my masjid, we did a series of sessions with different guest speakers, and we spoke about the important spiritual aspects of Ramadan, and that's important. And I'm sure Imam Huzaifa for the Greenville community has done khutbahs and halaqat, etc. But there's often an imbalance. You'll find a group of people that want to speak about the spiritual aspect and ignore the legalities. They'll ignore the do's and don'ts, and they'll say, it's not really important. And you'll find another group of people who are fixated on the legalities, on the do's and don'ts, on the rulings, and they don't look at the spirit. So you have to balance the both out. And the best example that I give is the Quran itself. The Quran itself has two types of ayat. There are the ayat of rulings, of aqaid, of theology, and there are the ayat of fada'il, of virtues, of stories, of motivation. And so both of those verses are in the Quran. Same thing goes for the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. There's the genre of spirituality, of motivation, and there's the genre of legalities of knowing what is halal and what is haram. Also, what's important to know is that since this is an issue of halal and haram, we're going to be talking about rulings, it is only natural that you will have differences of opinions in some of these issues. Now, in order to navigate that, I'll explain my methodology so that you are aware. The first thing is that the majority of the rulings about fasting are agreed upon, right? The majority of the rulings are agreed upon. There are areas which are disagreed upon, and they are a minority, and that's okay. That's not a problem. It's not an issue. That's okay. The reason why it's okay is because Allah and His Messenger ﷺ allowed for that to happen, right? And in order for us to understand that, there's two key points I want you all to keep in mind before we get in. Two key points as to why there's differences of opinions. Number one is because there is nothing explicit. There's nothing clear from the Quran and from the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. There's nothing clear. And so when there's nothing clear, what ends up happening is that the interpretation is differed upon from the time of the companions, radiallahu anhum. And there are many issues in fasting which the difference of opinion goes back to the time of the companions, radiallahu anhum, right? Now, that's for things that were there at that time. For certain other things that were not there at that time, and that came later on, which are known as nawazil, or which are known as, later on, contemporary issues that were not there, what the scholars do, the trained scholars, is that they look at the examples and look at the rulings of what we have, and then they analogize. And so they draw comparisons, and they draw generic principles, and they draw generic maxims from those sets of rulings and those sets of ahadith and Quran and the ayat that we have, and then they apply them to contemporary issues. And so, as a natural process, there is a difference of opinion. But the vast majority of the ummah has understood that, they've accepted that, and it's okay for you to take any of the two opinions, as long as the scholar that you trust and you follow, whom you ask your questions to, if they advise you to follow that opinion, that is okay to do so. And so wherever there's a difference of opinion, I will try to, inshallah ta'ala, highlight that as well. Lastly, as a final point, is that questions, right? Questions. I'm sure many of you have questions from now in your mind or throughout the session. If it is something that is that I say that is unclear in the moment, you can go ahead and write that, and Imam Hudayfa can interrupt me and let me know. If it is something that is just a general question, what I'd like for you to do is start writing them now. You can write them now. At any time a question comes to your mind, you can write them now. But the last 20 minutes or so, or the 15 minutes, we'll leave for Q&A. And so we'll take all of the questions at the end, inshallah ta'ala. And so if we're ready, Shaykh Huzaifa, we can begin?
Yes, of course, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan, Shaykh.
So let me just pull up the slides, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khair, Shaykh. Before the Sheikh begins, I just want to let anybody in the Greenville community know that if you want to follow material that Shaykh Hamzah does, mashallah, Shaykh Hamzah is not only an imam and scholar, but he's also somebody that does a lot of great academic work, a lot of classes, and he teaches at Miftah Institute as well. So you can check out his courses at Miftah Institute as well. Jazakumullah khairan.
Jazakallah khairan, Sheikh, for the plug, mashallah. Okay, okay, inshallah. So we'll get started. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Okay, so the first thing that we have to do is define. Definitions are important because in order for us to understand what we're looking at, we have to have a correct understanding of it. And so Sawm or Siyam, there are two words, Sawm or Siyam. They are in both nouns, and they are used to refer to fasting in the Arabic language. Sawm and Siyam. The Sawm, we'll look at it linguistically first. What does it actually mean in plain, simple terms? Sawm means to abstain or to withhold, right? And in Arabic, they say imsak. So when you withhold or when you abstain from something, that is the linguistic definition of Sawm. Now, the Islamic definition, which is the technical definition, if we're able to understand this closely, most of what we are going to discuss actually is hidden in this definition. Right, and you know, for the students of knowledge or those who study, they know that coming up with definitions is not easy because a definition is meant to cover as many aspects of the concept as possible, right? And so the most generic and the most comprehensive definition I came across was this, and that is that it is to abstain from eating, drinking, and I have to be explicit here, sexual intercourse. The reason I'm being explicit here is because many times we say intimacy, and there's a lot of confusion, especially amongst young couples and even at times married couples over what intimacy means. So, for example, does intimacy mean holding hands? Does it mean to any physical contact? And so we have to clarify that it actually means sexual intercourse, right? And there's no haya, inshallah, when it comes to the issues of deen and knowing what's halal and haram. So to abstain from eating, drinking, and sexual intercourse, the three things that you have to abstain from. From when? Now, the time period has to be specified, from true dawn to sunset. Now, what's meant by true dawn, in simple terms, is the beginning time of Fajr prayer, a Fajr Salah, right? And so, those who are observant or interested in astronomy or are students of fiqh, you would know that there is a subh sadiq and a subh al-kadhib, right? There is a false dawn and a true dawn. And what that means is that the false dawn is essentially when the light starts to kick in. When twilight starts to kick in, the first you'll see a vertical type of light, right? And then after some time, it'll go away and then there'll come a horizontal light. And if you don't understand this, that's okay. You have to go and observe this for yourself. That horizontal light that begins to kick in, that is when the Fajr prayer starts. And so from the time that the Fajr prayer starts, and sometimes people think that it means that it's from the adhan of Fajr, or if it's from the iqama or the prayer in the masjid of Fajr Salah, that's not what the starting point is. What happens is that many masajid, their adhan for Fajr is later, or their Fajr prayer is 10 or 15 or 20 minutes after Fajr time begins. So you have to go and you have to go and see what time Fajr begins in your locality. You narrow that down, and that is your starting point. And so you want to have your suhoor before that. Now, when do you fast till? You fast till sunset, and what that means is till Maghrib prayer. So when the sun has set and Maghrib prayer kicks in, from that point onwards, you can eat and drink. And the last thing, which is the most important thing, is that you have to have an intention of fasting. And we'll come to intention and I'll explain that. The reason why that's important is because if you did not have an intention to fast, and even if you spent the whole day and you did not eat or drink from true dawn, from Fajr to sunset, your fast is not accepted, right? And so it's very important to keep that in mind. Now, who has to fast in Ramadan, right? Who has to fast in Ramadan? This is important because we need to know who is exempted and who is obligated to fast. So in order for you to fast, there are generally speaking 6 conditions that have to be found in you. Number 1, you have to be a Muslim. So obviously, if you're not a Muslim, fasting is not obligated upon you. It should be common sense. Number 2 is adults. So if you are an adult, you have to fast. If you are a child or if you have children, it's good to encourage them, and it's good to encourage them to fast, especially if there's no health issue in particular that their physicians have said. It's important to encourage them to fast. And if they want, they can, what many kids do is they do a mini fast, so you can have a break for lunch, but in between that, you can, make sure that they don't, encourage them not to eat or drink. But again, this is all voluntary. It's not mandatory. It's voluntary. It's optional until they become people of bulugh, until they reach puberty and they are considered adults in Islam. Until that point, it is not obligatory for them to fast. Number 3 is someone who is mentally sound. And what this means is that if you are not in your senses, if you have a certain disorder, or if you are, for example, if you're going through some sort of, if you're a person of special needs, if that illness or if that special need is to the point that you are not, you do not comprehend things around you, you do not comprehend the concept of fasting, then you are exempted from fasting. Number 4 is you have to be healthy. And what that means is that you have to be physically capable. So you have to have the physical ability to fast. And if there's a reasonable doubt that you will become ill by fasting, or it will affect your health severely, then you need to, then you are exempted from fasting. And obviously this goes back to you discussing with a physician. And it's, the scholars always recommend a Muslim physician, because at times for a non-Muslim physician, just the entire concept of fasting just seems very, very daunting, simply because they've never done it. So the whole day without food, it may seem difficult for them. So try to find a Muslim physician who understands that, and yet they are sound and they are aware of your health, and they'll be able to advise you over your particular condition. And if it is so that they advise you against doing that, then one should not insist on fasting, because Allah has given you rukhsa, Allah has given you a dispensation. Number 5 is that you have to be a resident, right? So if you are a traveler, and what defines travel and not, that's beyond the scope of this class, but whatever would define travel, if you're in another city, if you're traveling outside of the journey of safar, or the exact the exact mileage or the exact amount that would make you a musafir and make you a traveler, then you are exempted from fasting. And number 6 is for women only, and that is that a woman has to be free from menstruation and postnatal bleeding. Both of those things, if she's going through them, then she is not allowed to fast, and she has to remake those days afterwards. Okay, let's talk a little bit about intentions, right? This is, in my understanding, out of the issues that are misunderstood in general. One of the issues that is misunderstood constantly is the concept of intention. And it's sometimes, actually, it's sad, but it's amusing at the same time how such a simple concept can be misunderstood. So first thing we have to identify, there's 4 questions I've put here. Number 1 is that what is required? So an intention is required. That much we know. We already talked about that. Number 2, what constitutes intention? Do I have to read a dua? Right? And people have a dua or a statement in Arabic saying بِصَوْمِ غَدٍ نَوَيْتُ, that I plan on fasting tomorrow. All of that is unnecessary. None of that is required. What constitutes intention is there being a concept, an idea, and a firm resolve, a firm resolvement in your heart and in your mind that you will be fasting. Now, what can constitute that? It can be any way that fits in your heart. For example, if I know in my mind I'm preparing for suhoor, obviously it means that I am preparing for the fast tomorrow. And so if I find that that I'm mentally aware of the fact that yes, tomorrow is a Ramadan fast and I'm fasting it, then that is enough. You don't have to verbalize the intention, right? And actually, some of the later scholars, the only reason they actually even introduced this concept of verbalizing is because people became people, they were so they were so confused about the concept, or they were so unsure, and they kept on asking questions. Did I have an intention? Did I not? So for the sake of that, they just said, look, just verbalize your intention. But it's something relatively simple. Understand that if you know that you plan on fasting, and if you have that resolvement, then that is enough. The preferred intention is that you need to have an intention for each of the 29 or 30 days of Ramadan, right? And so there is a minority group of scholars that says that, look, at the beginning of the month of Ramadan, if you have made an intention, it's enough for the entire month. But the vast majority of scholars, they say that no, every night you need to have an intention. And the reason we say night is because, again, when day kicks in at Fajr time, the fast has started. So during the night time, either after Maghrib kicks in, during that time, all the way for Isha, Taraweeh, all the way up till Suhoor time, you need to have that intention in mind that you're going to fast the next day. And the reason being because you have to discern and you have to differentiate between if you're going to spend that day not fasting for a reason or fasting for a reason. That has to be clearly stated. Also, timing of intention, right? Okay, so this issue is a bit technical. So what happens many times is that if you made an intention, here's one of the advantages of having an intention in the nighttime. If you had an intention in the night, and if you, for example, after Maghrib or after Isha, if you had an intention and then you slept and you didn't wake up, right? You didn't wake up and Fajr time is gone now. Suhoor time is gone, Fajr time is gone, and now you wake up. So can you fast or no? So the answer is, since you made your intention in the night, you can fast now. What about if you didn't? What about if you never made the intention after Maghrib? You had some iftar, you prayed Isha, maybe you fell asleep, and you woke up, it's now Fajr time. And so here there's a bit of difference of opinion. And what seems to be correct, and Allah knows best, is that you have until what's known as al-Dahwa al-Kubra to make the intention. What that means is that basically you have until midday. You have until midday to make that intention. What that means is that you take your day from the start of the time of Fajr and the start of the time of Maghrib, right? Let's say it's, for example, 10 hours, right? You take that 10 hours and you split it in half, and if that's 5 hours, then you measure 5 hours from the start of Fajr time. Fajr's at 5, that would be 10. You have until 10 a.m. to make that intention if you woke up in the month of Ramadan. And if you did not make it by that point, then your fast would not be counted and you have to make it up later on, which is called qada. Okay, the sunan of fasting. Okay, so there's two of the major sunans of fasting that are suhoor and iftar. Suhoor is known as the pre-dawn meal, which is before Fajr time enters. You want to have a meal, and it was a sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and there are many hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he said, "Tasahharu fa inna fi as-suhuri baraka," that make sure you have your suhoor, for in suhoor is barakah and blessing. And so you should try to have something for suhoor, and the sunnah is to delay the suhoor. What that means is that you delay it until a few minutes before Fajr time enters. So you should not, for example, have your suhoor maybe 1 or 2 or 3 hours before Fajr time, right? You can, but the sunnah, the preferred method, and the way the Prophet ﷺ did it was to delay the sunnah, delay the suhoor until there is a small amount of time, maybe a few minutes left before Fajr time kicks in. And secondly is iftar. So iftar, obviously, at some point you will make iftar. If you don't make it at Maghrib time, you will make it at maybe Isha time, maybe later on. But the sunnah is to do ta'jeel in iftar, is to hasten in doing iftar. And what that means again is once you know for sure that the Maghrib time has entered, then you should go ahead and break your fast. You should not wait 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes as some people do, either just out of precaution. You can have a reasonable precaution of maybe 1 minute, but once you definitively know, there should be no extra amount of minutes that you add to that. And there's many wisdoms behind this. One of them being that it's a way to curb extremism, right? It's a way to curb going overdrive into these matters, right? And it's because someone might think that, okay, if it's virtuous to fast, then I might as well keep going, right? And secondly, it's to understand that the order of Allah, when Allah has said to eat, then we eat, and when Allah says to stop eating, we stop eating. And so it's part of the perfection of servitude or ubudiyah for Allah, is that we go in accordance to how Allah has told us to fast, when to not fast, when to break our fast. And that's one of the wisdoms behind the day of Eid, it actually being haram for us to fast on the day of Eid. The wisdom behind it, one of the wisdoms, is that when Allah has said that today you will not fast, we say, oh Allah, you are our Lord, and today I won't fast. And when He says you will fast in the month of Ramadan, then we do fast. Okay, all right, so terminology, right? This is important. I have a sip of water. Okay, terminology, this is important. When it comes to making up fasts, when it comes to if you've missed a fast, there's 3 key terms that we have to know. And if you don't understand these key 3 terms, everything that will come after, you'll be confused. So make sure that you have these 3 noted down. The first is qada. Now, qada simply means to make up a fast, and it means to make up that one fast. And so, for example, if on the first day of Ramadan, you were ill and you were unable to fast, and then you fasted the second, third, you fasted the rest of Ramadan. After Ramadan, there is one qada, the qada that you have to do is one fast. So that one fast you missed, in substitute for that, you make up one fast. And you can make it up anytime after Ramadan. There's no limitation on what to do. Now, this part is relatively easy. The second one is a bit scarier, right? And that is kafara. Kafara is a penalty. And what kafara means is that not only do you have to do qada, so you missed 1 day, you have to make up that 1 day plus 60 consecutive days, right? 60 consecutive days. So 61 days you have to fast. The 60 days that you have to make up, you have to even make sure that you time them appropriately, because if you, for example, decided to make those 60 up and you started in Sha'ban, and so you made up 29 or 30, and then Ramadan came, the next Ramadan, your kafara is broken. And so, or a person that they fasted, let's say 30 or 40 days, and then they skipped 1 day, they have to start over. So 60 consecutive days, and it's a very heavy penalty, but I'll explain why that heavy penalty is there, and in most cases it does not apply to us. Number 3 is fidya. So fidya, to be very simple, is a substitute payment. And what that means, I'll explain in a moment, the amount of it, but the concept of a substitute payment is that if you're unable to fast, and there are certain categories of which you're unable to fast, then as a compensation, as a substitute for your fast, since you can't make it up, you engage in the devotion of Psalm by giving a payment for that. So these 3 terms are key and need to be understood. Otherwise, we won't be able to understand the remaining issues that are coming up. Okay, so qada and kafara, right? Qada plus kafara. This scenario only happens only happens when you intentionally and knowingly eat, drink, or engage in sexual intercourse. What this means is that you knew that it was Ramadan, right? It's the second day of Ramadan, you know it's Ramadan. And you know that you're fasting. So you're not forgetting, right? You're not forgetting. It's not that you forgot and so you had a sip of water. That's forgiven, right? As a matter of fact, your fast won't break at all. And it's not that it was an accident either. And so there's a difference between if you forget something and if something was an accident, right? If you forget something, it's that you forgot the fact that you were fasting, so you had a sip of water. An accident is when you you understood that you were fasting, and something mistakenly went down your throat. For example, you were doing wudu, right? And now you know you're fasting, and you were gargling, you had some water in your mouth, you were rinsing your mouth out, and you kept on doing it until the point that water went down your throat. So now your fast is broken. You have to make up one fast, qada, but you don't have to do the kafara. Why? The reason why you don't have to do it is because of the fact that it was not intentional, as in you did not intend to um, you do not intend to um, you do not intend to poke fun or mock or uh, take Allah's sha'air or the symbols of Islam, the unique symbols of Islam, the hallmarks of Islam, and make fun at them or to violate their sanctity, right? And that's very important because the violation of the sanctity is what is the reason for the kafara. You knew and then intentionally, on purpose, after you kept the fast, you went ahead and you violated Allah's order. And that's also understood from various hadith or various scenarios. For example, if a person was to kill in the haram, was to kill in Mecca, in the vicinity of the haram, or in Medina, in the vicinity of the haram, then that person's sin is more than a person that would kill in any other scenario or in any other place. Not the fact that because killing in any other place is somewhat okay to do. What that means is that you already had the sin of killing. Now you have the second sin of violating the sanctity of Allah's house, right? And that's why killing in the masjid or fighting in the masjid is worse. And that's why fighting in Ramadan is worse, because it's a noble month. And so that's something that we need to keep in mind. A lot of people, however, at some point or not, they may have been stuck in a situation where they now have to do a kafara. And for most people, when that happens, is that that you became baligh, you became of the age of puberty, and then you were young. Maybe it happened when you were 10, 11, 12, and then you were young and you didn't know at one point, you didn't know better, and shaitan got the better of you, and so you ended up having a sip of water, not knowing, right? Or if you're an adult, many times, then you especially got intimate with your spouse, and you weren't able to control yourself, and so you ended up violating the fast. And so for those people that have to do that, then they have to fast 60 days and make it up. And for our sisters, because this is a common question, if you're, it's obviously very difficult to fast 60 days without your menstrual period coming in between. And so for sisters, that's exempt. So those days, you simply won't count them, and then you continue your fast after those days. If you have multiple kafaras to do, so for example, let's say in one Ramadan, you broke one fast intentionally, and then the next Ramadan, you broke another one intentionally, and then the Ramadan after. So you have 3 times, 3 different fasts that you broke your fast intentionally in 3 different Ramadans. And so logic would dictate that you would have to do 30, you have to do 60 plus 60 plus 60. You'd have to do 180 days consecutive, right? But alhamdulillah, things aren't that difficult. So as a result, what you should do is that you can only do one kafara, and that will make up for all of the rest. From the mercy of Allah, you only have to do one kafara, and He wipes out all of the kafaras from the past. So I hope that concept is clear. Okay. Okay, let's look at exemptions, right? Okay, so for people who are people who have legitimate reasons to make qada, to make up their fast afterwards. And these are the direct opposites of those people who have to fast, right? A person who's traveling, right? So we said you have to be a resident in order for fast to be obligatory upon you. If you're traveling, then you are allowed to not fast. That dispensation is there, and you can make that up later. If you are sick, you're physically unable, your doctor, your physician has recommended that you should not fast, you can make that up later. Similarly for women, pregnancy and breastfeeding. Pregnancy and breastfeeding does not necessarily mean that you can't fast, but again, you should consult your physicians, consult your health professionals, speak to them, and if they think that in your particular scenario it's not a good idea for the baby or for the mother, then in that case you have that legitimate reason for qada. Okay, so we talked about qada, we talked about kafara, right? And we talked about all these terminologies, if you all remember. And so now is fidya, right? What does fidya mean? Fidya, we said, is a substitute payment, and the exact amount is the same as sadaqatul fitr, right? And zakatul fitr, which I'm sure you'll probably hear being talked about once we're into Ramadan. But essentially what zakatul fitr or sadaqatul fitr is that it is an amount that is given half a sa', which was the mode of measurement that was used in the Prophet's time, about 2.5 kilos, and you can convert that into pounds, liters, whatever it is that you're giving in, of wheat, and you can give in barley, you can give in dates, you can give in rice. That was the original concept for it to be given to those that are in need before Eid al-Fitr. Before Eid al-Fitr, you give it in order to make up for any possible defect in our fasting, and in order to help the poor enjoy their Eid. And so at that time it was given in the form of food, and earlier on, the majority of scholars said that you can't give it in cash, you can't give it in money. But later on, the scholars, especially with the time, and there was room for reinterpreting again, as I mentioned at the beginning, where there was a classical difference of opinion, then that is allowed for us to utilize that. And so nowadays, especially, it's very difficult to abandon that, and so you can go ahead and give sadaqatul fitr. It's about $8 or $10. $10 is a good amount to give, because the Prophet ﷺ didn't specify an amount. He specified a certain measurement, a certain amount of specific food types. And so it can range anywhere from $8 to $30. That's the reality. And so if you can give more, and sadaqatul fitr has to be given per each person in your household, whether they're male, female, child, adult. If you can give more, that's good. If not, then at least $10, should be easy to give. So for those people that are exempted and they have to give fidya, these are the people of old age. So someone who's reached such an age that they will no longer be able to fast ever again in their life, most likely, right? If you've reached 70, 75, you've gone through, different health issues, you probably won't be able to, your body won't be able to sustain that. And similarly, if you have a terminal illness or a chronic illness, diabetes, if it's that severe, other issues, it depends on your particular illness, how severe it is, and how likely it is that you will recover from it, right? So these three things have to be kept in mind. Number one, your particular health issue. Number two, how severe it is. And number three, the likelihood of you recovering from that. And if the doctors say that, the likelihood is very less, and, it's just that you won't be able to fast, then you can go ahead and pay the fidya amount is the amount of sadaqatul fitr per each fast. So for 30 days, for example, if you are unable to fast, then you would pay $10 per day as an easy, simple number, and you can do the math. 10 times 30 is 300, and so $300 would be the amount you would pay for each Ramadan if it's 30 days, and if it's 29 days, then accordingly. And if you're not able to pay that, if you don't have the financial capability to pay that, then that is forgiven out of the mercy of Allah as well. Okay, disliked acts. Okay, so these are acts that are sometimes thought to break the fast. They don't break the fast technically, but they are discouraged. They are disliked. They should not be done. Okay, of them is number one is chewing. So that can be chewing anything of flavor or without flavor, maybe a bottle cap, an eraser, some wire, anything, your nails, anything that you are kind of chewing on and not swallowing. Because if you swallow it, then your fast is broken. But if you're kind of just chewing on it and spitting out, then that is disliked. It's something that should be avoided. It's not a good habit anyways, but you're potentially putting yourself at risk to swallow something, and it's something that should not be done. Number two is being lazy. And what that means is that if you're fasting, you should be productive in your fast. In the month of Ramadan in particular, you should do away with your devices, phones, movies, shows, social media. You should spend less time on that. As a matter of fact, you should be spending no time at all, preferably on entertainment, and even social media. You should really tone it down. Spend more time reading Quran, and spend more time actually alone, even with your family. If you're doing something, try to do something that's productive. Maybe read from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, read the Quran together, and spend individual time doing dhikr, studying the Quran, any other subject that interests you in Islam, attend your Tarawih prayers on time, attend Fajr and Isha in congregation, etc., etc. Focus on those things. Number three, gargling excessively, right? And so gargling excessively. And so what that means is that what's madmada, known in Arabic, is when you begin your wudu and begin to rinse your mouth. You shouldn't do it excessively, because that's really pushing you to being on the border and then kind of swallowing the water. And so you should avoid doing that. All right. Now, a lot of people here, they think that if you've rinsed your mouth and there's some moistness left, then I have to spit it out of my mouth, and that's related to another concept actually, where people think that swallowing your saliva breaks your fast. Right? Swallowing your saliva does not break your fast, and any moistness, any wetness that's in your mouth after you've rinsed your mouth, that does not break your fast either. So what would break your fast is if you actually swallow down water. Literally, water went down your throat, then your fast would be broken. Fighting or cursing. This also does not technically break your fast, but it is disliked. It is against the objectives of fasting. Fighting, swearing, cursing, foul language, being physical with other people, that is discouraged. It takes away from the blessing of the fast. There are many hadith that the Prophet ﷺ discourages. Also, excessive physical activity. The reason for this is because it could lead you to break your fast unnecessarily. So try to avoid exerting yourself physically in the month of Ramadan if it's not necessary, especially if it's not related to your work. Don't, running, sports, etc. You want to avoid them during the daytime. Now with gyms being open and in the night in many places, you can, utilize maybe after Tarawih or before Fajr time, maybe have a run or something. But in the daytime, try to avoid excessive physical activity. Okay. All right. So last slide. Okay. Inshallah ta'ala, and then we'll take your questions. Last slide. Things that do not break the fast. So these are things that do not break the fast, but we at times think they do. Okay. So these are things that we need to make sure that we remember. Let's talk about bodily functions first. So vomiting. Vomiting does not break your fast unless it is intentional and it is a mouthful. Then in that rare case, it'll break your fast. But generally speaking, vomiting does not break your fast. Your saliva, swallowing your own saliva will also not break your fast. Nocturnal emissions, which is a more formal word for wet dreams. If you have a wet dream, or if you are, so if you have a wet dream, that won't break your fast, even if it's during the daytime, right? And if you, along with this, if you, for example, if you woke up and if you, let's say, for example, had intercourse in the night, and so you were in a state of impurity, and then Fajr time came in, and you had your suhoor, and you didn't have your ghusl, and so your fast is valid as well, but it's generally preferred that you go ahead and take your ghusl as soon as possible. Okay, so certain accidental things that are, or rather, things that are done out of forgetfulness, eating or drinking. Similarly with dust, bugs. If you are outside, maybe especially if you're kind of driving I would say a convertible, or you're on a motorcycle or something of that sort, and there's dust and just stuff coming at you, that does not break your fast. Similarly, if a bug would go down, a small bug, inshallah, won't break your fast as well. Hygiene. Let's talk about showering. Showering does not break your fast, and it is okay for you to shower. If you feel hot, you can go ahead and take a shower. There's nothing wrong with that. Miswak is okay for you to use. A toothbrush is okay for you to use as well. And a toothpaste is okay for you to use as well. The only issue with a toothpaste is if you swallow it. And so this is a very commonly asked question. And people, they feel that, for people who are particular about their oral hygiene, that they want to make sure that they are clean, and so they ask about this. Then it is permissible to use toothpaste, and the dislike, the karaha, the dislike that's there is if it's actually full of taste. So in that case, there's some dislike there. But if you don't swallow it, it will not invalidate your fast. And if you want to avoid even it being disliked, then you can get one that has a very light flavor or no flavor, and that should be enough for it, inshallah ta'ala. One thing I'll mention here is that the miswak is fine to use. Your toothbrush without toothpaste is fine to use. And even your toothpaste, you can go ahead and use it. Just ensure that it's not going down your throat. And I would encourage people to actually go ahead and at least get a toothpaste that is not flavored, and remember that you remember to use it, and especially after iftar, after you've had your iftar, especially use it, because remember that the smell of the fasting person's mouth is beloved to Allah, right? But that doesn't mean that it's supposed to be beloved to those around you, right? That's Allah and His mercy and His His rahmah, His forgiveness, and His vast fadl upon us, that He sees our devotion. But out of etiquette for those around us, we should ensure that we have oral hygiene is important. This year may not so apply because we'll have social distancing in Taraweeh, but regularly in Taraweeh, if someone's standing next to you, it causes an issue. Okay, let's talk about medicinal issues. So this is a common question that needs to be asked, right? Does the IV break your taking? If you're hooked onto an IV, does that break your fast? Blood transfusion, vaccination, COVID vaccination, any other vaccination. So to understand and answer all of these questions, there's a simple rule and a simple maxim. If you understand this, it'll answer all your questions. Anything that enters the mouth, the nose, or your private area, either from the front or from the back. So the 4 entry points into the body, anything that enters from there would invalidate the fast. If it is something that is a food, drink, or a sizable object. Now, if it is something that is not entering through those 4, then it does not break your fast. Whether that's an injection in your muscle, whether it's in your bloodstream, in a nerve, it doesn't matter. And so even what enters actually anything that enters the ruling is that anything that reaches your stomach through a valid entry point. Anything that reaches your stomach through a valid entry point. That's how you can remember. Anything that reaches your stomach through a valid entry point, that thing is going to break your fast. And so if it's not from a valid entry point, it won't break your fast, right? Obviously, the last point is there's a difference of opinion over eardrops and eye drops. The correct opinion, in my estimation, Allah knows best, is that it won't break your fast. Inshallah ta'ala, some of the scholars, they do take that opinion, and so if you follow that, that is fine. Okay, inshallah ta'ala. So that covers almost everything that I had, and we can go ahead and take questions. Shaykh Huzaifa, are you there?
Jazakumullah khairan, Shaykh Hamzah, for your beautiful presentation. MashaAllah, it was very informational, including for me. For those of you that came in a little bit late, inshallah, please go back and watch the video from the beginning so you can catch all the details, all of the information, inshallah. The thing with fiqh and the thing with legalities and do's and don'ts is that they're comprehensive, meaning you have to be here from the beginning till the end to understand the whole picture. So inshallah, go back. Inshallah, we have some time for some questions, inshallah, not to take up Shaykh Hamzah's time too much. But the first question that everybody has on their mind, and I've been asked this like 10 times already, is that does the COVID vaccine break our fast, Shaykh? And the second question is, let's say we feel fatigue or tired after taking the second dose of the vaccine or even the first dose of the vaccine. Is it permissible for us to break our fast? And what will we have to do? Will we have to do qada, fidya, kafara? What is it? Jazakumullah khairan, Shaykh. Please.
So I know this is a commonly asked question. So I covered this briefly, but I'll repeat again that for any injections, anything that enters your body that's not from the 4 entry points, right? From your mouth, nose, from your front private part, and from your behind. If it's not from those 4 points, anything else that's entered into your body from your from injections to IV to insulin to vaccinations, none of that will inshallah break your fast. If you took it and that didn't break your fast, but you felt fatigue or you felt aches or you felt fatigues or you felt you needed to take some painkillers or whatnot, then it would be permissible for you to break your fast, and only a qada, so only that day you'll make up, and any subsequent days that you miss. Let's see, if you miss the next day, you'll have to make up that day as well. So kafara won't apply here because again, you're not intentionally without any valid reason breaking your fast. You're breaking it due to a physical health reason. And so many people will be having their second dose or some even their first dose in Ramadan. And so inshallah ta'ala, that won't break your fast. Wallahu a'lam.
Jazakumullah khairan. There you have it, folks. That's the question that we've all been asking. MashaAllah, the Shaykh has answered it. Our second question, Shaykh, is that someone says that I noticed there are different times for Fajr based on different calendars. Which time for Fajr should we follow? So I think the question is more asking the practical aspect, like people have differences of opinion. What should a person do as a, just a regular practicing Muslim? What is the practical approach to follow?
Yeah, so I think the difference of opinion that we have to be understood in 2 ways. So you have an actual legal difference of opinion, a fiqh difference of opinion, and you have a difference of opinion when it comes to observations. So that the issue of the Fajr time entering is a difference of opinion and observation, right? At what point does the Fajr time enter, right? And so you have the 18-degree model and you have the 15-degree model. And the reality is that the 18-degree model is more precautionary. So it says that the Fajr time enters in earlier. The 15-degree model says that the Fajr time enters in a little later, right? Which one is accurate? Allah knows best. It's really in your particular area, there has to be an in-depth observation that's done over a long period of time to observe and see that. And it may be different from place to place. But again, you need resources, you need manpower, you need, we're lacking as Muslims, so we don't have that infrastructure in place. And so, in my opinion, is that you should go with a more precautionary view of the 18-degree. And it should be mostly a 10 to 20 minute difference. But if your local masjid is going with the 15-degree opinion, that's okay to follow, inshallah ta'ala. It's an observational difference of opinion, so you can go with either or, but stick to your community, stick to your masjid, and inshallah ta'ala, that is where khair is in, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala.
Jazakumullah khairan, Shaykh. Something that's really important is that, you're following the jama'ah, following the community. A lot of times we have like these moon wars, we have these Eid wars, we have all of these battles going on that people are fighting. But in reality, if you stick to your local community, you stick to your local masjid, your local imam, inshallah, most of these issues are actually very easily resolvable. Our third question, Shaykh, if you don't mind, is that when should you actually tell your children about fasting? When should you allow them for fasting? Because, there are different ages. Some people say that start at 7. Some people say start at 10. Some people let their kids start earlier. What is your practical advice for when children should start fasting?
So I think with children and fasting, so I think there's 2 points that need to be kept in mind. The first is that when children are young and they observe in the house, many times they'll want to fast themselves, and you should make an encouraging, environment in the house of fasting, and so they should be allowed to fast in a full capacity if they're able to, as soon as they can, if they're able to. And again, because many children, they do have health concerns. They're not of age and they need to be, on their, vitamins, medicines, food, a particular issue that they're going through. But if the kid is healthy and the kid is able, and, you consult your physician, and the physician says, look, the kid's able to fast, he can fast, inshallah. And if they're not able to do that, like I said, a good way to do it is you can kind of, get them to have a break, a lunch break in between, right? And kind of get them used to that. But it's not obligated on them until they have reached the age of puberty. When is the age of puberty? It can vary for boys and girls between the ages of 9 and 15 generally, right? And that's a separate discussion, but you need to have that discussion with your children as well, because when they reach the age of puberty, from that point onwards, it is mandatory for them to fast. And so they have to be made aware of that. That's a conversation that as a parent you need to have with your child.
Jazakumullah khairan, Sheikh. A beautiful insight on that. I just wanted to do 2 more questions, inshallah. So one of the questions that people have is that how sick do you have to be to skip fasting and to make up a fast? Like what is the line or the fine line for that? And I'll ask the second question as well. What is better to do? For example, let's say you're taking a trip during the day or something like that, and it's a few hours away, and you're technically considered a traveler. Is it better to continue fasting because you can, or is it better to take the rukhsa or the concession or the permission, in your opinion? Jazakumullah khairan. So the first question is, what's the fine line between sickness and should I continue my fast when I'm traveling if I can?
Yeah. So for the first question about sickness in particular, there's no exact definition of what that point can be, and that point really differs. That point really differs depending on you as a person. How receptive is your body to pain, to dealing with difficulties? What is your personal health? And so that's why you need to meet with your physician, and you need to tell them about everything. And a physician that's aware that you've been going to, if you have health conditions, they'll know if you're at that position or not. So a reasonable assumption, right? And what that means is most likely fasting is going to make your condition worse. Fasting is going to lead you down more problems. A reasonable assumption is enough for you to be excused from fasting, right? And if you're having difficult time on your own, you can go ahead and speak with your physician, and you can really reach that comfort point, right? And so obviously, for certain people that are going through actually the same thing. So I'll give you an example. The example is of a headache, right? Now, one is that you have a very, very light headache, right? Now, that much you can generally bear. It's not really, it's at the back of your head. We might have it here and there. We kind of work through it. Another is a person who's, for example, dealing with migraine headaches, right? And these are like extreme headaches. And even within migraine headaches, there's a spectrum of how bad it is. And so generally you can tell when your body can't take it, and you speak to your physician, and when you feel that that's the point, and you are honest with Allah, that, Ya Allah, I can't take it. This is the point there. I can't take it beyond. Allah knows, inshallah, and you are forgiven for that.
Jazakumullah khairan,
And the second question, I missed the second question. What was the second question?
The second question was that how do I know, do I have to, if I'm traveling, is it better for me to break my fast? Is it better for me to continue my fast? Like if you're not going across the world or something like that, something that's a short distance, maybe from St. Louis to Chicago or from here in Greenville to Atlanta, is it better for me to fast or is it better for me to break my fast?
Yeah, so I think, where Allah gives a dispensation, Allah gives a rukhsa, you should go ahead and take it. However, with kind of how we have become is that it's very difficult for us to make a fast afterwards. So my personal recommendation would be, if you are traveling and if there is not any physical trouble to it, if you're just grabbing a flight and you're probably going to a hotel and you feel that there's no physical, kind of wear down to you, then you can go ahead and fast. You can go ahead and fast, and you take the dispensation. The reason I say that is because for some people, they know that if they take the dispensation and they have to make up those fasts later on in the year, they won't be able to in the normal schedule, right? And so really look at yourself. If you can make it up, then go ahead and take that day off. If you know you can't make it up, and if there's no physical difficulty there, then you can just keep on going to keep that consistency there, inshallah.
There's another question, this last question, Shaykhana. If you are traveling and there is a time difference, what time should you break the fast?
Right. So if you're traveling, obviously, and there's a time difference, you go based off of the time zone or the timing of the area you're in at that time. So let's say, for example, if you started out, let's say in the West, right? And obviously, the sun sets later on in the West compared to the East. The East is ahead of you. So if you're in California and then you took a flight to New York, and by the time you got there, it's already Maghrib time. And in California, it's probably still maybe Asr, maybe even Dhuhr time, right? They're 1 to 3 hours back, right? So from the Eastern time zone and the Pacific time zone. And so you can go ahead and break your fast, because what matters is the exact time zone you're in, which you're witnessing, and where the exact place you are in.
Jazakumullah khairan for that beautiful question, Sister Azra. I just wanted to say one thing, mashallah, we're over an hour now. Mashallah, Shaykh Hamzah did an excellent job. For those of us that studied, we can attest to this fact that, mashallah, he presented it in a format that makes everything extremely clear. For those of you that had any other questions, inshallah, you can send them to me. I can convey it to him, and inshallah, he can answer. There were a lot of questions on Zakatul Fitr and, Taraweeh issues. Perhaps, inshallah, if, we have the time, inshallah, we'll maybe do another sort of collaboration between the Islamic Society of Greenville and the Islamic Foundation of Greater St. Louis to discuss Zakatul Fitr for the community and the questions that pertain to that. I just wanted to thank Jazakumullah khairan, Shaykh Hamzah, for all of your time. Jazakallah khairan for coming on and spending an hour of your time and explaining all of these intricate issues, preparing PowerPoint. We are all indebted to you. Jazakumullah
khairan. I want to thank Huzaifa, the ISG community. MashaAllah, I've heard a lot of great things about all of you. I want to thank all of you that listened in. And I want to let you know that if there are questions, you can send them to me or Imam Huzaifa. Fiqh is something that we forget very often. And us as students of knowledge, even us before Ramadan, we're cracking our books open and reviewing and making sure we are aware of all the issues. So if there's anything, you can always ask, inshallah ta'ala. And from myself to the entire ISG community, as well as my community, Ramadan Barak, inshallah, may Allah make your Ramadan blessed and accept our Siyam and our Qiyam bi'idhnillahi ta'ala.
Jazakumullah khairan, Shaykh Hamzah. Before I end, inshallah, I just wanted to let everyone know Shaykh Hamzah is a regular teacher at Miftah Institute. Please go register for his classes. Mashallah, he does a great job preparing, as you can obviously see. He presents everything with clearness. He's actually one of the people that taught me one of the finer and more difficult subjects of Arabic. And alhamdulillah, that helped me actually excel in my studies. He's an excellent teacher, excellent speaker. So go follow him if you're looking for something, just regular talks. He does regular talks at the Islamic Foundation of Greater St. Louis's Facebook page and YouTube page. Go ahead, subscribe, follow those pages. For those of you that are from St. Louis, inshallah, you guys can subscribe to the Islamic Society of Greenville's Facebook page as well. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept this small effort that we've made, alhamdulillah. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make this a blessed Ramadan for all of you, for your families, for your children, and allow us to reconnect and rekindle our love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and attain taqwa. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Till next time.